evening, old gun guy here with my video, shotgun basics in 10 minutes. I'm going to go over basically the ammunition. It's a little too crappy outside to do demonstrations. Shotgun, what is it? Basically a smooth bore firearm, shoulder fire firearm, usually. Has no rifling in the bore. Barrel internally is smooth. The reason for that is if you rifle the barrel and you try to fire a shot through it, the shot would just wildly disperse when it left the muzzle. So a shotgun shell, for the most part, contains multiple projectiles contained in a shotgun shell, propelled down the barrel. Once it exits the barrel, the cup starts that the shot is riding in, and it could be hundreds of pellets or it could be 9 pellets, depending on the shot size. Bird shot, buckshot, various sizes of buckshot, various sizes of bird shot. And they'll have their designed or designated uses, what they're intended to be used for. Obviously, bird shot, self-explanatory. Bird hunting, small game, rabbits, squirrels, pheasant, turkey, chukar, quail, you go on and on. Buckshot, deer hunting, buck, slang for a deer. And there's various sizes of buckshot. Federal law says you can't have a barrel less than 18 inches on a shotgun, shoulder fire. There is an exemption with them new, with the funny grips on them. They got like 14-inch barrels on them. I forget what they call them, but they're kind of a esoteric toy. In your shorter barrel ranges, 18, 20 inch, you're talking about your defensive shotgun, home defense shotgun, personal protection. If you're skeet shooting, trap shooting, hunting, you're going to have a shotgun with a 24, 26, 28, 30, 32 inch barrel, for different reasons. The way the gun swings depends on what you're doing with it. Trap shooting, skeet shooting, they all have guns that have been tuned and specialized for just each sport or your type of hunting. The shotgun is the most versatile firearm we have. Like I said, you can hunt small game with it. You can hunt larger game with it. It's one of the most effective personal defense weapons or home defense weapons, 0 to 20 yards or so. And then longer if you employ slugs. The average hands, depending on the ammunition you're using, slugs, birdshot, buckshot, 0 to 100 yards. The average person, if they get a little familiar with their shotgun, they practice with it, as they should. It's not really a problem putting 3 slugs into a 9-inch dinner plate at 100 yards. You should be able to do that, and that's basically the vitals of a deer. Some of the trick shooters can hit 200 or 300 yards away with a slug. All right, but you got to know the trajectory, hold over. That gets into the weeds there with that. But for the average person, it's the most versatile firearm you can obtain, and you really can't go wrong with that. The most versatile gauge within all the shotgun gauges is the 12 gauge, so keep that in mind, and there's a reason for that. I'll go through the gauges. Well, first of all, I'll go through the 6 gauges that survive to this day. The 10 gauge, the 12 gauge, the 16 gauge, 20 gauge, 28 gauge, and something that went extinct 80 years ago has been brought back the last 5 years by some dedicated trap shooters, the 32 gauge, and I was surprised to actually see ammo for it. You also have a 410 shotgun, but that ain't a gauge, it's a bore. It's 41 caliber. If you translate it into gauge, it's 67 gauge. The gauges are an archaic way of measuring a shotgun. Basically, they had a perfectly round lead balls that would fit a bore. the bore of the shotgun, the number of them that would equal a pound. So in 10 gauge, it would be 10 balls would equal a pound. 12 gauge, 12. 16 gauge, 16 balls. If you do the math, it's each ball will be an ounce. 20 gauge, 20, 28, same thing, on and on. Other gauges have come and gone, extinct. In the Old West, they had I think 8 gauge shotguns. But the ones that survive to this day are those. The bore of them, the 10 gauge, if we put it in caliber, 7/5,000ths of an inch. Basically 77, 78 caliber. The shells available for 10 gauge are 3.5 inches in length. Fired length, I should say. I shouldn't have went to that, but when the shotgun shell is fired, the petals on the crimp open up, and that is the 3.5 inches, not the actual unfired shell. It's a little shorter. We have the 12 gauge. That's 7/5,000ths of an inch. It's 72.5 caliber. Or millimeters, I think it's 18.5 millimeters. I'm not going to do the millimeters for the rest of them because I don't know them off the top of my head, but the shotgun shells basically they came a long time in just 2 3/4 inch. Then they had a 3-inch loading. Now we have a 3.5 inch loading, 3.5 inch shell, and they also come out these mini shells, 1 3/4 inches. So basically, it's a wide variety there. The 16 gauge, which is come back into favor after being in the wilderness for quite a while. 5 or 6 years ago, I couldn't see any 16 gauge ammo anywhere I went. But now it's around, it's available, and the manufacturer's making 16 gauge guns. It was very popular in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. Very popular gauge 50s. I hunted with some old time friends of mine. They loved the 16 gauge. The bore on that is 6/5,000ths of an inch, 66.5 caliber. There's only 2 3/4 inch loadings for the 16 gauge. The 20 gauge is 615 thousandths, so 61 caliber. And there's 2 loadings, 2 3/4, and they do have 3-inch Magnum loadings for the 20 gauge. And then the 28 gauge, it's 545 thousandths of an inch, almost 55 caliber, and it's just 2 3/4 inch loadings for the 28 gauge. It's a fine skeet round, and it's a fine quail gun, quail and chukar, upland game birds. Very low recoil, points fast. I never owned a 410 shotgun. Never saw the point. I like the 28 better, but to each his own. That's why they have a wide variety. When we talk about chokes, I'll give you a show of the gauges here. I got it on a little board. But for comparison, we have the 10. That's a 3.5 inch, actually a double O buck round. 12 gauge. Next to it, in comparison, that's 2 3/4 inch. I believe I got on there. 16 gauge, 2 3/4 inch loading. The 20 gauge, another 2 3/4 inch loading. Some of these are low brass, some of these are high brass shells. And a 28 gauge birdshot. They're all birdshot except for this one, double O buck. Going to the shot that they fire. This would be an example of birdshot. This is number 6 shot. Birdshot goes from BB, which is the largest. It would be 18 caliber, 180 thousandths of an inch. Goes all the way down to number 9 shot. There is a number 12 shot. They might put that in them shot shells. I haven't seen that, but number 9 shot might be 85 1,000ths of an inch. 8.5 caliber, something like that. The sizes go down. Obviously, the smaller the size pellets, the more pellets. However, they carry less energy and they don't travel as far, the smaller shot. Number 9 shot might carry 100 yards max if you shoot it in the air before it rains back down to earth. Or number 8 shot. buckshot, double O buck on your hand will carry a couple hundred yards and then rain down. Double O buck is 33 caliber. The largest buck is triple O buck. It's 380 thousandths of an inch, roughly 38 caliber, if you will. And the smallest buck is number 4. It's about 24 caliber, 240 thousandths of an inch. The number 4 buck loading, smaller pellets, less penetration if you firing it inside a house for personal defense. Obviously the double O buck or triple O buck's going to penetrate more, bigger pellets. The last is a slug. This is a Forster slug, Brennecke slug, Brennecke type slug. The Forster slugs have less pronounced rifling on them, imprinted on the slug. And how that works is when it's fired, the hollow base, the gas expands and jams the size of this slug into the smooth shotgun barrel, and then imparts spin to projectile to stabilize it in flight. So you can shoot slug and buckshot out of the same barrel, no problem, as long as it's this type of slug. The specialized rifle barrel shotgun, slug gun, for deer hunting, you could obtain a barrel for your shotgun. You got an 870 Mossberg, you get a rifle barrel for it, or rifle sights. You got to use saboted slugs, or sabot. It's got a plastic jacket that holds the projectile, and the rifling gate, when it's fired, the slug rides in the plastic sabot, and the rifle engages the sabot, imparts spin to the projectile, and it's got supposedly a longer effective range and more accuracy. And that's the purpose behind that. But everything else is smooth bore. Those are just shot sizes. And we go into all shotgun shells crimped. They're crimped with looks like a 6-sided pie. That's a typical shotgun crimp. Hexagonal star, if you will. When the shell's fired, this pops open and unfolds. And this is a 3.5 inch 10 gauge shell, double O buck. It's actually 3 inches, the shell, physically. When you fire it, the other half inch, the 3.5 inch number, is the petals opened up. I have a fired 28 gauge shell here. You can see the crimp is opened up. This is now 3.5 inches in length. Unfired is 2 3/8 inches in length. The last crimp method would be for the slug. It's open. The crimp is internal to hold the slug in, and it's fired and goes down a barrel. I think a conventional crimp would interfere and cause a pressure spike. All shotguns are low pressure weapons. The chamber pressures of 12 to 16,000 pounds per square inch when they're fired. Peak chamber pressure. There are powerful weapons though. This slug generates. This is a 1 ounce slug, doing 1,500 feet a second. I think it's 2,500 energy foot pounds at the muzzle. Very powerful. If you ever see a sort of deer shot with one of them, you see the damage it does. I've seen human shot with them, and you see the damage it does. A few homicides. Choke. We've got to talk about choke. All them figures I quoted for the shotgun bores was for no choke. Cylinder bore, it's called. It's the same dimension from the chamber all the way to the muzzle. Shotguns put constrictions for different purposes. To tighten the pattern of shot, keep it more dense for a longer distance. A cylinder bore, no choke. They measure shot pattern in a 30-inch circle. They have a shotgun target. A cylinder bore, 12 gauge. A cylinder bore, 12 gauge shot will keep 40% or so of the shot in the 30-inch circle at 40 yards. The other end of the spectrum, a full choke, will keep 70-75% of that same shot pattern in the 30-inch circle. So more shot density. Obviously, if you're hunting birds and you're taking a shot 35-40 yards away, ducks, waterfowl, the the dense shot pattern will aid in you taking the bird down. In the defensive situation, obviously, most of your tactical defensive shotguns just have plain cylinder bore. And the rule of thumb with that is you're firing buckshot or slug, it doesn't matter, but buckshot. Every yard the shot travels from the muzzle, the pattern will open up 1 inch. So 10 yards, you'll have a pattern, roughly a 10-inch circle. 20 yards, a 20-inch circle. So really 0 to 20 yards with your buckshot. Chokes come in cylinder bore, improved cylinder, a little tighter, modified. I've even seen improved modified. You know, some people get into the splitting hairs with them. Then you go up to full and then extra full, and you also have a skeet choke that opens up, designed to really burst the shot pattern open, because skeet is a lot of close range shots, 10-12 yard, real fast stuff. If you shoot and trap, you know, the distance is further, you know, a full or an extra full choke keeps the pattern tighter, so you can break the bird further out. The constrictions generally from cylinder bore down to like an extra full choke, 20 to 30 thousandths of an inch, depending on the gauge. You know, obviously it's scaled differently with the smaller gauges. The higher number, the smaller bore diameter, which seems like a paradox. The 28 gauge got a much smaller bore than a 12 gauge. Another term you might hear is high brass, low brass. All right. These are high base loads, high brass loads. Express load for 20 gauge, 12 gauge. The brass case is actually the gas seal when you fire the gun. A little bit higher pressure, heavier load. They use a bigger brass head. These lower pressure target loads, this 12 gauge white box, you know, Walmart stuff, and it's Federal, like a 7.5 shot. Lower pressures, low base. All right. 12 gauge. It is the most versatile round here. This would be a 3.5 inch turkey load, 3.5 inch high base load. It's 2 ounces of shot in that shell, just like a 10 gauge. That's why it's this 3.5 inch 12 gauge is eclipsing the 10 gauge. 10 gauge you become obsolete. With the advent of this, 3 inch Magnum, birdshot load, express load, high brass. 2 3/4 inch, low pressure, low base, you know, skeet load, trap load. And then they get these little mini shells. This is a Federal. It's got an ounce of shot in there though, like number 7.5 shot I think is in there. I think 7.5s are in here. This might be 3 or 4. And these are 5, I think. But these put out a lot of recoil. 12 gauge, if you have a 3.5 inch chamber in your gun, you could fire all these other shells in there. Obviously, if it's semi-auto pump, this little shell ain't gonna feed right. I have a semi-auto turkey gun. It feeds these 3 no problem. I wouldn't even bother trying to fire that in there. You get single load and fire it, but basically is more if you have a coach gun or a double barrel break open shotgun, single barrel shotgun, you're better off using that in there. And it's probably a useful round to teach a young shooter how to shoot. It's very low recoil. This is very high recoil. Low recoil, very high recoil. But forever, this was the standard, 2 3/4 inch. And then they come out 3 inch decades ago. But if you had a 3 inch gun, you fired a 2 3/4 in it. Obviously, you can't go this way. The chamber is too short for these shells. But if you have a 3.5 inch, you can fire a 3 inch, the 2 3/4, and you can fire that. But just to keep in mind, the reason you do that also is that full shotgun shells have a rim, and that's where the headspace is. Like a revolver cartridge, like a 38 Special or a 44 Magnum, or a rim. The case stops on the rim in the chamber. Um, for like I said, just to wrap it up, the most versatile firearm you could buy. If you're looking to buy a firearm, it might be a good choice for your first one. If you've never fired one before, a lot of ranges will rent firearms to you. If you're recoil sensitive, you might be better off with a 20 gauge. Another very popular round. The two most popular gauges are 12 and 20. And if I had to go from there, I would probably say 28, and then the 16, and then probably the 10. The 10's going by the wayside though, because that 3.5 inch 12 gauge is eclipsing it. There's really no need for it anymore. When you only had 3-inch loadings for the 12 gauge, if you're a waterfowl hunter, you could take a 50-yard shot at a goose with the 10 gauge, but it's throwing 2 ounces a shot. But now the 12 gauge is doing the same thing. Obviously, the shot patterns, slightly different, but that's getting off into the weeds. But 10's very popular too. Like I said, I never saw the need to own one. They're popular with some people. They're very low recoil. They're good for a kid if you're just teaching a child starting out. But if I were to buy, if you were a new novice or inherited a shotgun, it's very versatile. Whether it's a hunting gun or tactical gun, police type shotgun, pump shotgun, 20-inch barrel shotgun. It's very versatile. In a follow video, I'll do something with the practical test with the shotguns, both field and tactical, and reverse their roles and mix them all up, and you should show how versatile it is. But that's about all I got for this tonight. Thanks for watching, and have a good evening.